So ever since the launch of the new HSD, a lot of people have been asking, should I get the HSD or the GSD? And there's a lot of questions that come up, and I hope that I can answer them because there's a lot of differences between the bikes, but on first glance, they might look almost identical. If we look at the HSD first, this is kind of the new edition. Many details are same between the bikes. So 20-inch wheels, front and rear, really heavy-duty frame, this folding handlebar setup with a similar stem and grips and everything else. The brakes are a little bit different on the bikes. This particular one has Shimano brakes. Some of the other models have the Magura dual piston. So varied level of stopping power between those bikes. And that partly alludes to one of the differences between the two is their cargo capacity. The HSD clearly has a capacity on the rear rack. It's up to 132 pounds, whereas the GSD, it can accommodate up to 200 pounds. Now, because I was talking about the brakes, I should mention the brakes on the GSD, which this one is. This is the S10 version, has quad piston brakes front and rear, so a little bit heavier duty stopping power, and that's really to accommodate some of that additional weight. I'd say for most people, the scenario which is going to differ between these bikes is really what you're carrying in the rear. Both of them have the ability to stand up on their rear end, which makes it really nice for storing the bike. So you can basically, I'll show you how that works. If we just hold the rear brake and we just pull this bike up like this, you have the ability to stand it up. Now, just the same, you can do that with the HSD. So, kickstand up, and just like that. So, in continuing the conversation about the cargo area, the real difference is the GSD is made to carry 2 kids or maybe even a small adult up to 200 pounds. Where the HSD is really designed for just 1 additional passenger. 2 really is not going to cut it on that bike. So if you're thinking about carrying 2 passengers or 2 children, the GSD is the way to go. If you just need 1, the HSD might be the way to go. But there might be scenarios where you might even want to go with the GSD. Maybe you need that extra capacity. So say, for example, you're carrying a child that's 100 pounds, but then you want to have the additional capacity to carry a lot more cargo, the GSD is going to be a good way to go. Maybe you just don't want to wait. I mean, the GSD S10, as this one is, and the S00, they're available now. The HSD is going to start rolling out towards the beginning of 2020 with 2 different models, the P9, which we see here, the derailleur setup, and then the S8i, which has the internal hub. Then we'll see the S Plus coming later in the year. So if you want to carry 2 kids, you could use this setup on the GSD called the Clubhouse, or you could also run without the Clubhouse and you could just do the pads. These are the Clubhouse pads. There's also available single or pads that you can run on the back here, which you can run with the child seat, like the Yup seat over on the HSD, or just run 2 pads and run a handlebar on the back here. But in looking at the HSD, we have the ability just to run the 1 child seat. Tern is working on releasing a passenger kit for the HSD. However, at the moment, there's no real public details about that, so I can't talk to that too much, but we know that that's pending. So maybe another one of these scenarios, if you have a very young family where you just have a young child that you need to carry, or maybe you have a child on the way, the HSD is one of those bikes that maybe you can grow with. So you can eventually put your child into the child seat like the Yup Maxi we have on here. And then eventually, as the passenger kit comes available, they can grow into that. I mean, 132 pounds is a good amount of weight to carry for sure. So I think that's mostly it on the cargo side specifically. We did another video about the HSD accessories, which are compatible, and we'll have another review about the GSDs. Some other details that kind of relate to carrying children is the kickstand. Now the HSD at the moment is just a standard single leg kickstand. I could just flip the bike around so you can get a better look at it. So it's just this single setup whereas the GSD has a double leg kickstand, which is a little bit better set up when you're carrying a little bit more cargo and makes the bike a little bit more stable. And on top of that, the GSD, they do have two other kickstands. So the S00 comes with a slightly upgraded kickstand, and they have a new pending kickstand called the Atlas, which is really heavy duty and made specifically to carry some extra weight in the back. So that's something that's available for the HSD, or pending availability in relation to the Atlas. And it does seem like the HSD has the ability to eventually add one of these double kickstands, because they built the frame with these mounts here already. So I'm sure that eventually they will release that, but at the moment that's not an option. And then looking at that same concept, and as we're looking down here, you could see some of these other parts which are just on the GSD and not currently available on the HSD, like these pegs. Generally, you just run one or the other. The pegs are great if you just have a single passenger, or a single passenger that's bigger, and then you have a child seat in the back, and then you have these running boards here, which are great as well. Along with this added cargo capacity, we have some different motors which are available on the GSD compared to the HSD, and they're really paired properly. I mean, so the S10 has the performance line motor, which has 63 Newton meters of torque, whereas the S00, both GSDs, has the CX motor, which has 75 Newton meters of torque, which is quite a bit. So a little bit more torque on this setup, and then you also have the ability to run 2 power packs on these bikes. So this comes standard with just a single 400 watt hour, similar to the 2 entry HSD models, but you have the ability to run 2 power packs, where the HSD has just 1. So if you wanted to go really long distances, the GSD might be a better way to go, where the HSD just going to have that single battery. You could always carry additional batteries on board, and on top of that, actually the motors on the HSD, they're slightly more efficient with this new Generation 3 system, but they all work really well, and the Bosch system, in our experience, is one of the most reliable ones on the market. So this is the GSD motor setup, and let's take a look at the HSD motors. So from this side, you can see this is the Bosch Active Line Plus. One thing you might notice is the motor is a little bit smaller. This is Bosch's Generation 3 motor, and one of the differences with this motor compared to the Generation 2, which is on the GSD, is they don't have this internal reduction gear. Bosch previously used the internal reduction gear to allow the motor to work a little bit more efficiently, and recently they've been going in the direction of removing the reduction gear. So I'm going to flip this around and I'll show you the other side of the motor, and you can see one of these big differences. So you could see this larger chainring on here, whereas the GSD has a smaller chainring, uses a reduction gear, so every pedal revolution on the GSD rotates this 2.5 times. On the HSD, it's a 1-to-1, so just like a standard bike. And it performs maybe a little bit more like a standard bike. You don't have as much power on these motors, the Active Line Plus. It's 50 Newton meters, but they work a little bit better without power in comparison to the Gen 2 setup. Now I should note that the S Plus is going to be available a little bit later after the P9 and the S8i. That one has the new Generation 3 performance line motor, and it has 65 Newton meters of torque. So a little bit of a jump up from here. So if you really want maybe the highest performance HSD, but really I found after riding this a little bit that all these things work really well. I'd really like to talk about just the different types of terrain and riding where you might find one of the bikes maybe performs a little bit better than the other. For example, the S00, you have that max torque, 75 Newton meters. So you might find in maybe the most hilly environments that bike's going to perform a little bit better than, say, something with the Active Line Plus. And that's where those Newton meters of torque comes into play. But I should note that the drivetrains, depending on which one you get, they can vary in efficiency. The Enviolo hub, although it's really easy to operate and very low maintenance, it's not as efficient as a derailleur. So something to consider. Hope I'm not overwhelming you with all this information, but I think it's good to just get in all these details about the differences between these bikes. So speaking of drivetrains, let's take a look. Now, this HSD has the Olivio. It's the Shimano Olivio 9-speed derailleur, and works really well. I'd say relatively good range of gears there. Not a super low gear, but I think it's paired really well on this bike. And then if we go over to the GSD, in a similar spec, we have the Shimano Deore derailleur, and that's going to be a 10-speed. But you can see with this larger chainring in the rear here, it has a little bit of a lower gear available, so a slightly wider range of gears. Now I don't have the GSD S00 here, but that comes with the NVOLO hub, and that's a continually variable transmission, and it works really well because you can shift from a standstill. There's no index, so you can really dial in whatever cadence you want on the bike, and it works more like a volume controller as opposed to like an old school channel clicker as the way the traditional gears work. And that system's really popular for us because it's very low maintenance and it works great in urban environments. And for people that don't have as much experience with traditional gears, they find just shifting by twisting like that works quite well. Now I just want to show the two other versions of the HSD and their drivetrains, and then we can do a bit of a wrap up on this. So this is the S8i. This has the same Active Line Plus motor, and it's paired with the Shimano Nexus 8-speed hub. So this is an internally geared hub. There's 8 indexed gears. Now the nice thing about this, again, you can shift from a standstill. Another thing that's really special about this, unique to the HSD, is a belt drive. Only available on the HSD at the moment. The GSD, even with the NVOLO hub, is currently using a chain. And I think it's partly because of the restraints of the frame on that bike. So I'm not sure if we'll see that maybe in a future iteration of the GSD, but you can see it's just this, the belt on here. The belt is really great because it's very low maintenance. You don't have to worry about grease or anything like that. And it's very quiet as well. So if you have the option to go for the belt, maybe if you have the budget for it, it might be a good way to go. And the HSD S Plus model has the NVOLO hub and a new system for NVOLO. It's their latest version of their automatic shifting. They call it the Automatique. It kind of feels a little bit weird to say it, but I guess it's kind of a little bit French. And that system, it's fully automatic shifting. So all you do is you say, this is the cadence that I want to operate my bike at, and the system's automatically going to shift to keep you at that optimal cadence. So it's really like an automatic transmission on a car. And the nice thing is there's no steps to it, so you don't feel like those bumps as you're hopping into the different gears. Just a few more details before we wrap up here. I want to talk about the wheels. So the GSD has 20-inch wheels as well as the HSD. The GSD has a 2.4-inch wide tire, so a little bit of a wider tire, a little bit beefier. Maybe it's going to handle a little bit rougher terrain better, but it doesn't have suspension, but the tire can act as a sort of suspension. It's what's called a balloon tire, and you can run it at lower pressure. With that, it also is set up with through axles front and rear. So let's take a look at the HSD setup, which has a lot of similarities, but some slight differences. Both 20-inch wheels. This is paired with a suspension front fork, but it has a little bit of a narrower tire. So this is a 2.15 compared to a 2.4 on the GSD, and it is also set up with a through axle in the front, whereas the rear end is using a standard quick release. So that's one of those ways where they maybe saved a little bit of money and made it a little bit lighter and simpler. The last detail I'd really like to share is about the price. So the HSD, it comes in with the P9 version at $31.99. So $3,200, really great entry price point with them for a very well spec'd bike. Now keep in mind a couple of accessories are added on that bike, and then the GSD starts at $39.99. So about $800 difference between the two. And that probably comes down to some of those different parts like the through axle, heavier duty frame, slightly different motor, brakes, that sort of stuff. But they're really both great bikes. So if you want more details about them, you could check them out on the Turn website. We'll have a bunch of details on our website. We're also making videos about all the accessories that are available for these bikes, as well as individual reviews on them. So, you should definitely check those out as well. And if you have any questions, just leave them in the comments below or just reach out to us via email and we'll be happy to help. I really hope you enjoyed the video and look forward to seeing you in some future ones. All right, thanks.